Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. The day that should have brought clarity instead became the most devastating turning point of Trina's life, because when 5 long-buried secrets exploded into the open at the exact same moment, everything she thought she knew, trusted, and believed in collapsed beneath her like shattered glass, leaving her standing in the wreckage of her own world, unable to breathe as truth after truth ripped through her with unforgiving force, starting with the revelation that Curtis, the one man she had slowly come to accept as her biological father, had been hiding a medical crisis far worse than any of them imagined. His paralysis was not healing, and tests showed a degenerative nerve condition he kept from Trina because he didn't want her wasting her life worrying about him, a confession that hit her with guilt, anger, and heartbreak all at once, making her question whether she ever really knew the father she had just begun to love. But before she could even process that emotional blow, the second secret detonated when Portia, shaking, confessed to Trina that the night of the shooting she had manipulated evidence behind the scenes in a desperate attempt to shield Curtis from further trauma, and in doing so, she had actually delayed Drew's rescue, something Trina had never imagined her mother capable of, and the betrayal of learning Portia had interfered with a police investigation for personal reasons left Trina stunned, ashamed, and furious, realizing her mother's pattern of control and deception was far worse than she thought, and as if those revelations were not enough to tear her in half, the third secret crashed down like a storm when Spencer's letters, every letter he had written from overseas, were finally uncovered, but the devastating truth was that Esme had intercepted them before she supposedly died, meaning Spencer spent months believing Trina had abandoned him when in reality Trina spent those same months thinking Spencer didn't love her anymore. A tragic manipulation that robbed them both of time, trust, and the future they were desperately trying to rebuild. And when Trina saw Spencer's handwriting pleading for her, begging her not to give up on them, her heart shattered all over again because she realized the distance between them wasn't created by heartbreak, but by lies that still lived in the shadows of Port Charles. But the fourth truth broke her in an entirely different way. A video surfaced, one she never expected to see, revealing that Cyrus, in one of his final acts before disappearing again, had orchestrated the entire chain of events the night Curtis was shot, not to kill Curtis but to create chaos around the Ashford and Robinson families for reasons still unclear, and that bombshell made Trina realize the danger surrounding her wasn't random, wasn't unlucky, wasn't fate, it was targeted, calculated, and connected to a web of criminals who saw her as leverage, and suddenly she felt violated, unprotected, and furious that everyone hid the depth of that danger from her, thinking they were protecting her when all they did was strip away her agency and her right to know the truth. And when Trina thought she had absorbed the worst of it, the fifth and final secret came like a merciless strike straight to her chest. Taggart, the man who raised her, the man she still called Dad because he was her heart even when biology said otherwise, confessed that he had been planning to leave Port Charles for months because he believed he was holding her back from fully accepting Curtis as her father, and though he meant it as an act of love, Trina heard it as abandonment, another man deciding what was best for her without asking her, another person she trusted choosing for her instead of with her, another piece of her life slipping away without her permission, and in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of 5 monumental truths crashing down at once, she felt completely alone, her relationships fractured, her trust obliterated, her identity shaken, her sense of family ripped apart by confessions no one prepared her for, and as she stood in the center of Portia's living room with every eye on her, Curtis reaching for her, Portia crying, Taggart apologizing, Spencer struggling to speak, Trina realized she had nothing left to hold on to, nothing solid, nothing safe. Her family was splintered, her relationship was wrecked by lies, her stability was a memory, her confidence shaken, and the girl who once fought fiercely for truth and justice now felt like she was drowning in a tidal wave of secrets she never asked for. She screamed that none of them had the right to make choices for her, none of them had the right to hide the truth for her own good, none of them understood how deeply these lies cut, and when she walked out the door, her voice cracked but strong, saying she needed space, real space, to figure out who she was without the weight of their secrets. No one dared stop her because they all knew they had pushed her too far, broken her too deeply, and as she disappeared into the night, the silence she left behind was heavier than any words spoken, because for the first time in her life, Trina didn't know where she belonged, who she could trust, or how to rebuild from the rubble of so many truths detonating at once, and the heartbreaking reality was that she didn't just lose one thing, she lost everything. Her foundation, her certainty, her peace, her sense of family, and maybe even Spencer again. But what none of them realized yet was that this moment, this collapse, this painful unraveling would either destroy Trina completely, or spark the beginning of the strongest, fiercest version of her she had ever been forced to become. But the night did not give Trina the peace she was searching for. Instead, it wrapped around her like a cold, heavy blanket, reminding her that every step she took away from the people she once relied on was a step into the unknown, a place where she had no one to shield her, no one to soften the blow, no one to tell her which direction to move toward next. She walked aimlessly, her breath sharp, her chest tight, replaying each revelation over and over again until she felt physically sick. Curtis's secret illness, how could he hide something like that from her? If he didn't trust her enough to tell her the truth about his own health, how could she trust that their bond was real? And Portia, her mother, her anchor, the woman she defended through everything, had interfered with a crime scene and then lied about it because she thought she knew best. The weight of that betrayal pressed into Trina's ribs until she felt like she couldn't inhale without it hurting. Even worse was Spencer. The letters. The months she spent grieving the loss of what they had, thinking he had emotionally abandoned her when in truth, he was reaching for her, begging for her, desperately trying to hold on to their love while Esme played puppeteer from the shadows. The tragedy of it made her want to scream into the night sky until her voice broke. She thought she healed from Spencer, she thought she moved on, but the truth was she had been healing from a lie, not from him. She wasn't sure what was worse, the pain or the realization that she still cared. Then there was Cyrus. The shadow creeping at the edges of her life, the man whose presence alone could unsettle every inch of her world. Learning he had orchestrated the chaos that nearly killed Curtis, and that she'd been kept in the dark for months, was enough to break something inside her. No one told her. No one warned her. They let her walk around believing it was random, bad luck, wrong place/wrong time, when in reality she had been surrounded by calculated evil. It made her feel violated, like her very life had been used as a pawn on a board she never agreed to play on. And finally, Taggart, the one person she thought she could always trust, had been planning to leave Port Charles behind, believing he was doing her a favor by removing himself from her life. That confession stung in a way she couldn't put into words. It felt like abandonment disguised as sacrifice, and the pain of that was almost unbearable. She felt hollowed out, scraped clean of anything stable or familiar, and as she walked through the empty streets, she wondered how everything could fall apart so completely in just a few hours. Trina eventually found herself on the waterfront, the place where so many beginnings and endings had happened in her life, and as she stared at the dark water, she felt the memories wash over her like a tide she couldn't control. She remembered talking to Spencer here, fighting with him here, forgiving him here. She remembered laughing with Joss, confiding in Cameron, holding hands with Taggart on the piers when she was little. This place used to be a safe haven, and now it felt like another ghost of the life she used to have. She sank onto a bench, wrapping her arms around herself as the wind picked up, and she whispered into the night, "Why wasn't I enough for any of them to tell me the truth?" The question lingered in the air, raw and heartbreaking. She didn't say it out loud for pity or for anyone to hear, she said it because she genuinely didn't know the answer. Every single person who claimed to love her had decided to protect her by lying to her, and now she didn't know who she could trust, who she could turn to, or who she could even believe anymore. But the night wasn't done with her. She heard footsteps behind her, slow and hesitant, and when she turned, she saw someone she didn't expect, Joss. Trina blinked, unsure how her best friend had found her, but relief hit her so hard she nearly broke. Joss sat beside her quietly, not asking questions, not pushing, just being there, which was something Trina desperately needed. After a few minutes, Joss finally spoke. "They told me what happened. All of it." Her voice was soft, careful. "I'm so sorry, Trina. None of this is fair." Trina didn't respond right away. She couldn't. The silence was heavy, filled with things she couldn't articulate because they hurt too much. Joss gently nudged her shoulder. "Talk to me." please. Trina swallowed the lump in her throat and whispered, I don't have anything left, Joss. I feel like everything in my life broke in the same hour. My family. My history. My relationship. My trust. My sense of safety. Everything. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. What am I supposed to do with that? Joss took her hand. You don't have to do anything tonight. You just have to breathe. It wasn't a solution, but it was something. Something gentle in a night full of brutality. They talked for a long time, about Curtis, about Portia, about Taggart, and inevitably, about Spencer. Trina's voice cracked when she mentioned the letters. He kept writing, she whispered. He didn't give up on me. He thought I gave up on him. Joss frowned, anger flashing in her eyes. Esme destroyed everything she touched. Even after she was gone, she still found a way to hurt you. Trina nodded, tears slipping down her face again. And now I don't even know what to do with that. How do I forgive something that wasn't his fault? How do I fix something that shouldn't have been broken? Joss squeezed her hand. You don't fix it tonight. And you don't owe anyone anything right now. Not even Spencer. Trina listened, knowing Joss was right but feeling the ache all the same. The truth was she missed him. She missed what they were, what they could have been. But she also knew rebuilding trust after such deep manipulation would be harder than ever. Still, the night wasn't finished with her yet. Because while she sat there, trying to stitch the pieces of her emotional world together with Joss by her side, Spencer, unbeknownst to Trina, was searching for her everywhere, desperate, terrified, and consumed with guilt. He had gone to her house, the gallery, the Metro Court, even Kelly's, and when he finally spotted her on the waterfront, sitting on that bench with her face buried in her hands, his heart cracked open. But he didn't approach right away. He froze, torn between the instinct to comfort her and the fear that he was the last person she wanted to see. Joss, noticing him, stood up immediately, protective as always. Not now, she said quietly, stepping in front of Trina like a shield. She's not ready. Spencer's voice was barely above a whisper. Joss, please. I just need to make sure she's okay. But Joss shook her head. You don't get to make this about what you need. She needs space, and the last thing she needs tonight is more confusion. Spencer looked over Joss's shoulder at Trina, her face streaked with tears, and he felt something inside him collapse. But he didn't fight Joss. For the first time in his life, he honored a boundary. He backed away, his eyes never leaving Trina, then turned and disappeared into the night, carrying a heart full of regret. When Joss returned to Trina's side, she didn't mention Spencer. She just sat back down, letting the silence settle again. Eventually, Joss offered to take her home, but Trina shook her head. I can't go back there. Not tonight. Joss nodded. Then you're staying with me. I'm not letting you be alone. And she didn't. Joss walked her all the way home, made her tea, set up blankets, and stayed awake beside her because she knew Trina wasn't truly sleeping, just closing her eyes and trying to survive the longest night of her life. Morning came, but it didn't bring relief. It brought consequences. Portia and Curtis were frantic. Taggart was panicked. Spencer was wrecked. And the entire town whispered about the explosion of secrets that tore Trina's world apart. But Trina wasn't ready to face any of them. She wasn't ready for apologies, explanations, or emotional pleas. What she needed was time to decide who she was without the lies, without the manipulation, without everyone else's version of her life. She needed to rebuild from the ground up. And as she stared at the sunrise from Joss's window, remembering the promise she made to herself the night before, she realized one thing with absolute clarity: she might have lost everything, but she had not lost herself. Not yet. And she was determined to fight for that, no matter who she had to walk away from to do it. Days passed, but the shadow of that night followed Trina like a relentless storm cloud she couldn't escape. Even with Joss at her side, even with tea and blankets and long talks into the night, the weight of the truths she had learned didn't lighten, it only settled deeper into her chest, making each breath feel measured and deliberate. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Curtis's pained expression, Portia's trembling hands, Taggart's apologetic eyes, and Spencer's desperate letters, and the faces weren't just images, they were accusations, reminders that the people she loved had failed her in ways she wasn't sure she could forgive. She found herself pacing Joss's apartment, running her hands through her hair, trying to organize her thoughts, trying to find a plan, trying to understand how 5 monumental secrets could hit her at the same time and leave her standing on the edge of her life like someone dangling over an abyss. Finally, she stopped in front of the window, staring down at the streets of Port Charles. Life went on. People laughed, cars drove, and the world didn't pause to care that her life had been dismantled piece by piece. That's when the anger rose, not the grief, not the sadness, not even the shock, but a pure, burning anger. "How dare they," she whispered, barely audible, as though the words could shatter the glass. "How dare they think I couldn't handle the truth? How dare they think I didn't deserve to make my own choices? How dare they manipulate me, hide from me, control me, all of them?" Her voice trembled with rage, a mix of sorrow and fury so intense that Joss simply watched, waiting until the storm passed. And yet, even in her anger, Trina knew she had to act. She couldn't stay in this suspended state forever. The 5 secrets, Curtis's illness, Portia's manipulation, Spencer's intercepted letters, Cyrus's orchestration, Taggart's intended departure, were all her reality now. They were no longer shadows, they were facts. The problem was, these facts weren't just information, they were life-altering, heart-shattering, relationship-shredding truths that demanded action. Trina couldn't unlearn them, and she certainly couldn't pretend they didn't exist. She had to navigate a maze of fractured trust and dangerous alliances, and for the first time, she realized that the person she needed to rely on most was herself. She started with Curtis. She needed to face him, to see his condition with her own eyes, to decide whether her love for him could withstand not just the truth about his health but the deception he had practiced in the name of protection. When she arrived at his home, he tried to reach for her, to wrap her in his familiar embrace, but she flinched, not from him, but from the cumulative weight of everything she had learned. "I can't," she whispered, tears spilling over. Curtis's voice was shaky, trembling. "Trina. I didn't want you to worry. I thought I was protecting you." Trina's heart broke all over again, but this time the heartbreak carried steel. "Protecting me? By lying to me? You took my choice away, Curtis. My right to decide how to handle your truth. That's not protection. That's control." For the first time, she didn't cry out of sadness. She cried out of anger and realization. She had been treated as fragile when she was capable, as weak when she was strong, and the betrayal cut deeper than any illness or plot could. Next came Portia. Trina needed answers, not excuses. Portia had tried to shield her from the consequences of her own decisions, and it had gone catastrophically wrong. "Why?" Trina demanded, her voice shaking with barely contained fury. "Why did you think you could manipulate everything? Curtis, the police investigation. Drew. Spencer, why did you think you had the right?" Portia's tears flowed freely, guilt etched into every line of her face. "I only wanted to keep you safe," she pleaded. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Trina shook her head. "Safe? You robbed me of everything, my peace, my trust, my relationships. Safe isn't hiding the truth, Mom. Safe isn't deciding for me. You failed me. And I don't know if I can forgive that, not yet, maybe not ever." Spencer's name came next. She had tried to avoid thinking of him, trying to lock away the letters, trying to convince herself that moving on was easier than reopening wounds, but the truth called her. She found him sitting alone in a quiet cafe, eyes red from sleepless nights. "I didn't know," she whispered when she finally spoke. "I thought you abandoned me. I thought you stopped loving me." Spencer's face crumpled. "Trina. I was reaching for you every day. Every single day. And Esme, she took everything from us. I couldn't get to you." Trina's chest tightened, torn between the anger of lost months and the ache of love that still lingered. You couldn't get to me because someone else controlled our lives. And now I don't even know if we can rebuild what they destroyed. And as the days stretched into weeks, Trina realized the final truth, the one that cut through everything like a knife, was that she could no longer depend solely on the people she loved. Curtis, Portia, Taggart, Spencer, they had all faltered. They had all failed her. But she had survived. She had endured 5 truths detonating simultaneously, truths that could have broken anyone. And though she had lost the stability of her world, she had not lost herself. In the rubble of her life, Trina found clarity. The only person she could fully rely on was herself. Her choices, her instincts, her heart, they were hers alone, and from now on, she would navigate the chaos with the fierce independence she hadn't realized she possessed. Trina might have lost everything, but in losing everything, she discovered something even greater, the power to reclaim her life, rebuild her identity, and rise stronger than she had ever been before.